Redditors who have seen a UFO, Bigfoot or any other mythological creature, what is your story and how did the people you know react to your story? Okay, so I have a story that happened to me and my friends. To set the scene, we were on a Boy Scout camping / shooting trip. There were 20 to 30 of us. We were in a little cabin thing with windows on the front and back, and a front and back door. There were wooden tables all around the area. The adult cabin, with the bathroom, was about an 8 of a mile down a gravel road in the dark. There was obviously a buddy system, because it's Boy Scouts, so it's around midnight, and everyone had been telling scary stories, like normal camping trips. Well, I had to go to the bathroom, and ask my friend to come along. He said sure, and he got our knives. We knew that there were bears in the woods, and it made us feel safer. Well, we went to the bathroom and began our walk back. This is where it got scary. I felt an instinctual, not sure if that's the right word, fear. I looked to my friend, and he had the same look as me. We begin to walk a little faster and unfold our pocket knives. I then turn around and see it. It looked similar to a cat, but it was 6 feet tall and was on its hind legs, kinda hunched over. I freaked the heck out and started running. My friend sees it and we sprint back to the cabin. It began making a moaning / howling noise. It was somewhere between the two and followed us slowly. We pound on the door and the guys let us in. We tell them what we saw and they actually believed us. So we lock the front door and look at the back door. It had no lock. We pushed a table up against it and had a kid there with his knife. For safety, we draw the blinds on all the windows that had them. One of them didn't. And we sat there with all the lights on. Then we see the eyes outside of the windows without blinds. We all are shitting ourselves. And the thing slowly walked to the back door. We heard it bumping up against it, maybe trying to open it, we think. It then left. But we still thought we were going to die. No one slept. When the adults came to wake us up, we told them, and they laughed and said we were making it up. We know it happened. Even if they don't believe us. Just realized how long this is, and at noon we'll read it. Oh well. I've lived out in the middle of nowhere for about 10 years. I'm a smoker and a night owl. I smoke outside, so I've seen some strange things. Distant points of light changing course and shooting off at extreme speeds. Probably meteorites deflecting off the atmosphere. I really don't think a visiting intelligence would have lights on a spacecraft. I've seen several instances of things like this, maybe a dozen or so times. But the one thing I've seen that gave me chills and baffled me was a black oblong object, think cylinder / thermos, floating through the sky. It was darker than the night sky behind it, utterly silent, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I recall the night being completely silent too. No crickets, no cicadas, just silence. This was in the middle of summer. I told my family, and they just shrugged their shoulders. Weird. My husband described a very similar experience to me about a year ago that he had late the night before. It was a massive black object flying in utter silence. I vaguely remember him trying to wake me, but I sleep like a rock. The only difference was that he described it as chevron / boomerang shaped with several lights along the bottom. Made him pretty uneasy. Edit. Yes. Right after he told me, I showed him pictures of a B-2 bomber thinking the same. He said it wasn't a triangle shape, more of a V, no center. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him and he just couldn't see the center. But who knows? We do live about 3 hours away from Malmstrom AFB, so it's always a possibility. I was camping in the Rockies and was stargazing and spotting satellites. I found a satellite and tracked it for a while. Eventually, it halted and switched directions. No one believes me, but I saw it. No, I wasn't high / drunk / tripping. It was a very clear night, and I was sober. Maybe there is another explanation, but that night it was an unidentifiable flying object to me. Finally a chance to tell my story. About 10 years ago my family and I were up in the White Mountains of Arizona to cut down our Christmas tree. My dad was driving our truck with my grandpa in the front seat and my mom and sister in the back seat. I was in the bed of the truck along with our family's German short-haired pointer. We were driving along a forest road and all of a sudden my dog starts barking and growling. So I look to see what it is, thinking it is maybe a bear or mountain lion. What I saw was a tall dark figure walking parallel to the road about 60 to 70 yards away. I yelled at my dad to stop the truck. When I told him I think I see Bigfoot, he just laughed and continued to drive. When I looked back to get another look at it, the figure had changed directions and was walking away from the road. The last thing I saw was the thing's head disappearing down a hill. To this day I still do not have an explanation for what I saw. Every time the situation comes up, my dad always makes me tell everyone my story, just so he can laugh at it. The White Mountains, dude. That's skinwalker territory, definitely not Bigfoot. I lived in a funeral home, and we had speakers to hear if anyone was downstairs. We'd hear slamming doors and footsteps only to find no one there. At band practice, we all saw blinking lights in the sky that moved really fast and would stop and disappear and reappear and move all around like typical stuff. We recorded it and went on a site, and they said those lights went from Washington down to Florida over the course of a few days with thousands of reports. It's hard to argue it was anything when there are hundreds of videos and so many eyewitnesses. Not sure what it was, but most people I tell are very intrigued and not weirded out. I've been dealing with seeing stuff like this for practically my entire life. I deal with hypnagogia, which is a condition that causes me to have extremely vivid hallucinations as I begin to fall asleep. Ever since I was about 7, I have dealt with seeing monsters, ghosts, aliens, and pretty much anything else my mind could cook up, all hanging out in my bedroom. Needless to say, it scared the shit out of me for years, although I've gotten used to it and generally ignore the things I now see. One story sticks with me. My great uncle Bob died when I was 8. The night after his funeral, I dreamed he walked past my bedroom door, wearing entirely white. He stopped and looked in on me, and then with a smile, continued down the hall. I remember it being the first time I experienced one of these dreams and wasn't scared. Well, the next morning at breakfast, completely unprompted, my mom talked about this wonderful dream she had where Bob came into her room and sat with her. That was too much for me. I exploded into tears and was inconsolable. The thought that I had then, and I still sometimes deal with today. If Bob was really there, what other things that I had seen were really there too? This is very interesting. Can you tell us some other things you have seen? For sure, I've seen tons of weird things. Some notable highlights. The first one I ever had, and the one I see the most, is a green monster. Almost like Darth Maul, but green instead of red. And no eyes. I saw it climb out of a portal on my ceiling, hissing at me as it came. Since then I've probably seen it 100 plus times. Even as I've moved houses and states. Sometimes it's outside. Sometimes across the room. Sometimes sitting on my bed. It never talks. Just hisses. I had a few weeks where an old woman with a very graphic and serious head wound was sitting at my desk chair. I remember the plop of flesh falling off her head onto the ground. She would mumble about how I was letting her down. I never knew who she was. A kid missing an arm used to run around my parents' house. I mostly saw him sitting on my bookshelf. He would smile at me, then threaten to steal my arm to replace his own. A soldier with an assault rifle stood at the foot of my bed. Rifle pointed right at me. He threatened to blow me away if I didn't drop my weapon. Which of course I didn't actually have. This is a really small sample from 15 years of this stuff. These are just standouts. I would be more than happy to answer more questions about them, or go into more detail, if there's an interest. I've seen 3 things that could be described as UFOs. First one, I was with friends and we all saw it. We were hanging out at a park at night being typical teenagers, and saw a series of red, blue, green, and white lights spinning slowly in the sky. We couldn't see the actual aircraft, but the way the lights were spinning, it gave off the impression that it was a plate-shaped object. We all basically stared at it in silence for 45 seconds or so until it just disappeared. Second time was by myself. I was laying out in my backyard and saw a silver disc in the sky. I thought it was a weather balloon at first, but then it started moving very quickly in a triangular pattern. You know the 3 points in a triangle? Picture it going from each point very quickly. taking a quick pause at each point. Like the first time, I watched it for about a minute until it vanished. Third time I was at a party, being held in a garage. I stepped out to the end of the driveway so I could make a call and saw a slightly reflective black plate-shaped object hovering in the sky. At this point I was basically annoyed. Like WTF, how many times am I gonna see these things and be scared shitless by them? Anyways, I watched it for a longer time than the first two. About 3 minutes. And then the sky flashed blue. Picture a heat lighting type flash but blue. And it was gone. I asked the party goers if they saw anything weird and they just said yeah, that random lighting. It's been 4 years since the last time I saw one. I'm pretty convinced I live near some secret military testing place or something. To see a UFO once is crazy. 3 times is almost unbelievable. I'm glad it hasn't happened again though, cause it's pretty scary to see. When I was a kid I was playing by the woods at night catching fireflies. We lived out in the middle of nowhere. About a half-hour drive to the closest town. Well anyway, I hear some sticks breaking, and I'm getting excited thinking it might be a wild turkey. I was ducking, obsessed with the things, even though they weren't known for the area. I was a dumb kid, but now I know that by the sound of the cracking sticks, that it could not have been a turkey but something quite a bit bigger. I run over towards the trees and further from the house and I start to get this feeling like I felt before I was about to be punished. Shots of adrenaline and fear. I stopped moving immediately and my eyes were darting along the tree line rapidly searching for what was causing that fear as I broke out in a cold sweat. 2 bright eyes, like a cat's eyes, sat about 3 feet above the ground, about the size of a baseball. It wasn't like the eyes watching from the darkness in movies, where they are glaring. These eyes were wide open, unblinking, and staring right at me. I felt like prey. Then, slowly, the eyes rose up until the creature was standing at about 6 feet high. Now I could see its outline. It was huge, bigger than anything I had ever seen. That was when its lips pulled back from its teeth, and I hauled ass back to my house. I told my dad, and he gave me a spanking with the paddle for lying. Mine was a ghost. I was about 19. My grandmother had died less than a month prior. We were having a family gathering and related to her passing, I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up late watching some old Nick at Night reruns on their old tube. I drifted off on the couch around 2 AM, partly wrapped in a rough green and brown handmade blanket a friend had made for me. I woke up between 3 and 4 AM, felt cold and groggy, looked up and saw my grandmother. Go upstairs and sleep in a proper bed, she says. Get moving. I picked up my blanket and dragged it behind me up the steep stairs. She looked better than when I had last seen her alive, but equally as insistent and daunting. I didn't dare refuse. Didn't occur to me until the next morning that she was, in fact, still dead, since this was the kind of thing she would do regularly before she passed. That's nice of her, DS. My mom was taking master's courses when I was in preschool 1st grade. I would wake up in the middle of the night and go downstairs to eat an apple and do a puzzle when she was studying. I distinctly remember floating through the dining room on multiple occasions on my way to the kitchen. I would scream for my mom, but she wouldn't hear. I would then wake up to my mom carrying me upstairs because she would find me sleeping on the dining room floor in the same spot behind the table. I was never freaked out until I learned the first owners killed themselves and their young son, who also had red hair, and his body was found in the same spot. I never thought anything of it until I looked up the history of the house. My mom was visibly upset when I showed her. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.